Hello there. This is Logan Clarke again from Global Pursuit Investigations. And people have seen a couple of these videos and they're asking how I got into the intelligence business. And I mentioned owning jazz bars in Southeast Asia. When I left the United States at 19, after I did the private detective school and the undercover case with Chrysler, I went to Southeast Asia and worked with my mom, who was a nightclub singer, jazz singer, entertainer, and had worked all over the world. We traveled all over the world. And when I went to Southeast Asia, she was doing some different shows, and through her, I met an admiral that I became friends with. And that admiral introduced me to a group of guys who worked for a company called Air America. Air America was like the first FedEx, the first DHL, UPS. So Air America was an air cargo company, and they made a movie about it starring Mel Gibson and another well-known actor, anyway, called Air America. And I met these captains and became friendly with them. And the admiral had asked me one time to take a envelope over to somebody in Vietnam for him. And the envelope had the wax seal on it and everything. And he just told me to take it to a bar over in Saigon. And I did, just a favor. I took it over to him. And that led me into doing a few more things for him. And this group of pilots, mainly one pilot, Bob Hope, who was Air America. And through them, I got involved in the intelligence business and being what the government calls an in-country asset. And that is expatriates who live in war countries, the outskirts of a war, the borderline countries. And there's always Americans that live around there. Americans, Englishmen, Australian, Germans, a lot of different people who live there, and they open businesses. And a lot of them open bars, nightclubs, jazz clubs, all kinds of stuff. And so that's how it kind of all tied in, my background with the private detective business, and then kind of sliding into that and working with this one pilot in particular with Air America. It got me involved in bar owning like they all were, and doing certain intel work for the United States and a couple of its allies, England and stuff. And I can't really get into all the details of that, even though it's been a long, long time. There's certain parts of it that I just, should stay away from. And it doesn't really have to do with the detective stories. If I get into all of the intel stuff, then that's a whole new book. But that is how I kind of always had. I've always said that I kept one in my life. I kept 1 foot on the curb and 1 foot in the gutter, and I do that because I got to know the good guys and I got to know the bad guys. As a private detective, or whether you're doing intelligence work, you have to know the good guys, you got to know the bad guys. There's some of the bad guys that you can approach and still carry on conversations with. For an example, I told about the Asian country where the terrorists were. And I happened to know for many years the head of a terrorist organization, and we were friends. But back then, it wasn't as volatile and violent in the 70s as they are now, like Al Qaeda and the shootings here. It was a whole different world. In the intelligence business and the private detective business, though, it gets pretty dangerous, especially in third world countries. When you start messing around over there, you're taking your life in your hands. So I wound up owning the jazz bars, which kind of fed, it was a great cover, and it was a great attraction for business as far as the private business that I was doing. And that kind of, explains how I got into this, or I just kind of found myself in it. Did a couple of favors, and the next thing I knew, I was in it, and I just continued. It was a rush. I'm a thrill slut. I love the rush, the edge, the anticipation, and not knowing exactly what's going to happen. You plan things in this business and in the intelligence business. The only thing that is certain is uncertainty, because nothing ever goes exactly as you plan it. So that edge is what really keeps you going, and there's a rush to it. There's a lot of guys who came back from Vietnam, and when it ended, and there was just like a big drop-off. I guess out in Afghanistan, Iraq, a lot of the places, you get to a point where you live on the edge all the time, and it's just second nature, and there's such a rush to it. I guess it's like competition sports too, insane sports, and the rush of it, and the winning or losing. In the business I'm in, the winning and losing is usually a lot more dramatic, although some sports, there's some pretty dramatic endings in sports. So it's just that rush. You just want to stick around it. In 1975, when Vietnam fell, there was a bunch of us that had been working together, and we'd been bar owners and doing the private investigation business and the intelligence business, and we all got together in Hong Kong in 1975, and I think Nam fell. It was in the summer, around the summertime of 1975. I think maybe August. Anyway, it's a long time ago. When it fell, there were about 5 of us that went to Hong Kong and spent a few days in Hong Kong just getting drunk and kind of trying to figure out what we were all going to do. And we all decided that why don't we go back to our countries, our homelands that we're all from, since we were all from different countries, and get licensed as detectives in those countries. When I worked before as a private detective, I worked for another detective agency. They had a license, and I worked underneath them. So we were talking about getting our own licenses and doing what we did for the government, only do it privately and make more money. Plus, we had a tremendous amount of connections. Guys that were captains at one time when we knew them and worked with them were now majors and colonels. So the contacts were incredible that you get, and why not keep doing that, only do it on a private basis? And that's really how we all wound up forming, and we have detective agencies. Most of us to this day still have detective agencies that are operating in Australia, in Asia, in England, Germany, all over the place. And you get a network. Then you got a great network. And then the associations really started getting big. So that's how I got into and mixed all these careers together. the three were show business, the detective business, and the bar business, and the intelligence business. Four. Anyway, that's how I got into it, and that's where some of these stories are coming from, and that's how I wound up doing all this crazy stuff.